Hello. Flipping through the August 2009 catalog of the home furniture store CB2, a consumer comes across this image when they reach page 68. Their eye is drawn to the center of a modern living room scene, onto a pillow with a screen-printed image of a hand-drawn horse's head. The product description informs that the Horse of Course pillow is the result of a special partnership between CB2 and Creativity Explored, a nonprofit visual arts center where artists with developmental disabilities create, exhibit, and sell art. The pillow is the creation of the artist Teresa Perez, and a percentage of each sale will go directly to Creativity Explored. The consumer is thus informed that this product will not only decorate their home, but will also support a developmentally disabled artist's solvency. CB2 defines their style as spare and simple, but also unique, claiming on their website to, quote, search the world for one of a finds, limited edition items crafted by artisans with a story and a history, end quote. I claim that the story and history being told here is not specific to the artist Teresa Perez, but rather points to a familiarized public fantasy mythologizing artists with mental disabilities. Public fantasy is a term developed by film scholar Teresa de Lauretis to specify narratives that are easily and pleasurably recognizable to the general public, legible identifications and plots reiterated throughout centuries of popular culture. The public fantasy called up here is that of artistic madness, a narrative whose representative individual often leads a tortured, misunderstood, and isolated existence that is only later validated through the creation of idiosyncratic and transcendent artwork. Creativity Explored's ongoing partnership with CB2 is one mass market presence of this narrative, evidence of the viability and ongoing normalization of artistic madness as commodity. I assert that artistic madness as a marketing strategy gained a specific articulation, formula, and momentum through the field of outsider art, an art historical niche market which has sought out and promoted the art of mentally disabled artists for nearly 4 decades. In the crowded and intimate fairgrounds of the 2011 Outsider Art Fair, the main commercial event for the category, this fantasy is occasionally incorporated into the work's display. Here at Gallery Christian Birth's booth, Alexander Lobanov's 5 drawings are accompanied by a wall text which informs the viewer that he was institutionalized for most of his life. Likewise, the wall text for Jill Gallieni claims that her art was motivated by a desperate attempt to overcome mental health problems from further interfering with her everyday life. Far beyond gallery standard information, like the work's name, date, and price, or even the art historical context major museums often incorporate, these texts ensure that viewers are aware of artists' mental health while they view the work. In a commercial marketplace like an art fair, this information would only be communicated because it is believed to make the work more desirable to a potential buyer. The field of outsider art first began with British art critic Roger Cardinal's 1972 book of the same name. Cardinal embraced the same criteria for inclusion which artist Jean Dubuffet delineated for the French field of art brut in the 1940s. Artists must be uneducated and sufficiently marginalized from mainstream society so their artwork could be seen as evidence of an uninfluenced creative impulse, an utterly original, raw vision. Mental disability, more than lack of education, poverty, or general eccentricity, was seen as a special guarantee of cultural isolation and the artist's authenticity. In the introduction to his book, Cardinal describes madness as an effective creative posture. The present landscape of outsider art has a wide range of critical and ethical investments, many of which are centered on essential and life-changing advocacy for artists with disabilities. However, once this work is put up for sale and viewers are preemptively aware of an artist's mental condition, a singular interpretation is pinned onto the work. The public fantasy of artistic madness becomes a generalizing biography and the dominant underlying assumption to everything displayed. It stagnates every individual artwork's potential for aesthetic autonomy. The limitations of this framework are particularly present in monographs within the outsider art canon, texts which historicize exemplary outsider artists. I explore two such well-known artists, Martin Ramirez and Judith Scott. The strikingly similar interpretations Ramirez and Scott receive, despite their difference in materials, their very different diagnoses, the 40 years between their peaks of artistic production, and the different setting of their creative practices, underscores the interpretive formula plaguing the category. Central to this formula is the notion of authorial naivete, the claim that the artist had no concept of themselves as an artist or what they were making as art. The introduction to John McGregor's monograph on Judith Scott, entitled Metamorphosis, the Fiber Art of Judith Scott, bears the following assertion. She does not know that she is an artist, nor does she understand that the objects she creates are perceived by others as works of art. Whatever she is doing, she is definitely not concerned with making art. Scott, who was born with severe Down syndrome and was institutionalized by her parents at the age of 7, was deaf, mute, and unable to write throughout her life. After 30 years spent in the same psychiatric hospital, she moved to live with her sister in Oakland, California, and was enrolled at Creative Growth, a center for artists with disabilities. How McGregor knew what a woman without the abilities of language considered herself or her work to be is never explained. Now, my goal here is not to debate Scott's awareness of her practice, as any such assertion is merely conjecture. However, McGregor's potent claim has an overbearing effect on all subsequent evaluation. Scott's most complex form of communication, her artwork, is reduced to compulsive habit. Metamorphosis also features this photo, documenting the artist at one of her exhibitions. Scott embraces her sculpture with both arms, one hand circling its center, her other hand only slightly visible resting on its top, as if she was patting its head. In her seminal text, Seeing the Disabled, the disabilities scholar Rosemary Garland Thompson identified 4 key modes in which the disabled body is commonly represented in popular photography. These modes, the wondrous, the sentimental, the exotic, and the realistic, are all constructions of disabled identity, all rubrics in service of instructing or assuring some aspect of the ostensibly non-disabled viewer. Garland Thompson's work has illuminated the limitations of these rubrics, providing opportunities to not only dispute these modes' supposed factuality, but also to locate them within a long line of disempowering representation of the disabled, which have become routine in contemporary visual culture. When placed in context with the claim of authorial naivete, Scott's portrait falls directly under the wondrous mode Garland Thompson defines. This mode places the disabled individual, quote, on high, and elicits awe from viewers because of the supposedly amazing achievements represented, end quote. Side by side, Scott and her sculpture take up equal space in this image. Artist and creation are both on pedestal here, intertwined and prepped for the viewer's inspection. Scott's disengaged stare draws us to concentrate on her eyes, the one visible trait which could indicate her Down syndrome. She is possessive of her sculpture, seems affectionate towards it, yet appears to be entirely unconscious of the process of documentation which is unfolding. This image, under the lens of McGregor's claims, validates our consumption of the artist as wondrous, reinforcing an assumption of her as an unaware creator. Similarly, the 2 major monographs on the artist Martin Ramirez posture him as a naive author, often aiming formal analyses of his work on pinpointing his exact mental diagnosis. Featured in his 2007 monograph, Martin Ramirez, a black and white photo from 1954 documents the artist and his doctor, Dr. Tarmo Pasto, holding up a drawing in a communal room at the DeWitt State Hospital in California. Ramirez, a Mexican immigrant who was committed to a psychiatric hospital for the last 35 years of his life, earned multiple diagnoses, ranging from manic depression to catatonic schizophrenia. He ceased speaking shortly after his hospitalization, but drew prolifically on anything he could find, including the long rolls of paper used to cover hospital examination tables. Dr. Pasto, a longtime supporter of Ramirez's work, gazes upon the artist's drawing with focused intent, holding up its left corner. The artist, however, looks away, not at the camera and not at his work, appearing distracted or perplexed by the photo shoot. Dr. Pasto is dressed in a suit, while Ramirez wears a bathrobe and slippers, typical attire in a psychiatric ward when one is required to be free of belts, shoelaces, or ties, which might double as a suicide device. The two men contrast in every way. The sane doctor is focused on advocating for the artwork, and the insane patient, an unaware idiot savant, is naive to the power of his creations. Their dynamic falls under Garland Thompson's sentimental mode, which places the disabled subject in a, quote, more lowly, pitiful position that requires paternal supervision, end quote. This reading of Ramirez is made blatant with an assertion by Wayne Thiebaud in an essay he wrote for the monograph Martin Ramirez, The Last Works. Thiebaud says, Ramirez represented a very high degree of craft, expressing how much he meant what he was doing, but he had no idea that he was making art. Thiebaud, who met Ramirez at most a handful of times while visiting DeWitt, decided the artist was unaware of what he was making. If we accept this account, then we are buying into the equation that Ramirez's life's work could only be designated and named as art by falling under the gaze of an educated art world insider. The role of authorship in outsider art's construction of artistic madness is thus a distinct one. Photographic portraits and expert claims construct the mentally disabled as authors without influences, without intentions, and without reflection, authors naive and disempowered. Disempowering the author has the subsequent effect of producing a more empowered viewer. The first viewer of the work, often the artist's handlers or gallerists, are empowered with the eye of discovery. If the artist has no awareness of what they are making, the work requires the gaze of the sane and the educated to transform it into art. The public then play into this dynamic as well, assuaging any potential anxiety of identifying with the mentally ill by confirming the work as art, by grasping in it something the mentally disabled artists themselves could not understand. They are consequently confirmed in their good tastes, their awareness, and their mental stability by finding the work artful. This empowerment is desirable and represents a unique instance in the contemporary art market when the public feels more aware, more informed, and more insightful than the artists themselves. Outsider art's articulation of the artistic madness public fantasy thus operates as a successful marketing strategy, an empowering mythology for viewers to consume. Its presence in mass market retail like CB2, as well as the rapidly proliferating network of outsider art journals, fairs, galleries, art centers, and museums over the past 30 years, speaks to its ongoing commercial success. While an essential conversation has been opened up about the limitations this interpretive framework poses on the art within, the top-selling, highest-priced, and most well-known outsider artists continue to be those with a diagnosed mental disability. Thank you.